My name is Alex. I am from Brazil. I've been trying to have a nomad life since 2023 with some ups and downs. I create travel vlogs, mostly in Portuguese and occasionally in English. Why on earth would I go to Afghanistan? Well, first of all, why on earth would anyone go to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, or any major city in Brazil? Or Mexico? Tell me, why would you go to Mexico with all the crime, kidnappings, scam, etc.? Even Europe is becoming an unsafe place, and yet millions of people keep visiting Paris, Rome, London every day. Personally, I was in shock when I saw this clip online showing a Flixbus being attacked and travelers' bags being stolen in the middle of Paris. Secondly, who am I to compare myself with the likes of Trubinsky, guy with millions of followers and an endless budget? He went to Afghanistan. Many other YouTubers with a reasonable budget came to Afghanistan and made amazing videos about food, people, cities, nature without any incident. Those people spent something between $1,500 and $3,000 by hiring middlemen. This channel right here is not monetized. I am now struggling to get to 500 followers, which is something you can obviously help with if you hit the subscribe button and spread the word by sending this video to family and friends. But until I get there, I don't have $3,000 to spend on a middleman, or 1,000, or $500. I don't do guides. If I want to visit a country and I need to pay someone to protect me from groups, organizations, or that country's government itself, then I simply do not go. A perfect example of that is North Korea or Turkmenistan. In Afghanistan, in many cases, those so-called guides are the old fixers that when the country was occupied by American forces, they had knowledge on both sides so that they could safely bring news teams and TV crews with an endless budget to dangerous locations. And by bribing the right people, they could achieve their goals. Also, in places like Haiti, Yemen, Sudan, these people are necessary so that news teams can do their jobs and rich tourists can fulfill their desires. I've watched many videos about Afghanistan in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. These are all people who, at some point between 2023 and 2025, decide to take the risk of a trip to Afghanistan and document it for YouTube. They all did it with some kind of local help, except for two. The Bolivian content creator Caplex gives the impression that he goes to Afghanistan without a guide. Actually, this Bolivian man, who has very interesting channel, I am his big fan and suggest you subscribe to his channel as well. He went to Afghanistan twice as he lost the hard drive with all his work when traveling back home. It's not quite certain whether he traveled without a guide, as on some of his videos there was always a second man with him all the time. He also released some videos about America's most dangerous country, Haiti. And in Haiti, he did have guides. Also Walid, a man with US nationality who claims to be born in the Palestinian territories in the Middle East. He made 8 beautiful videos about Afghanistan without any help of a local guide. And I won't even mention the American guy who converted a Lamborghini into a camper and is now spending several weeks in Afghanistan without ever being bothered by the people in charge. So, after watching all those videos, I decided to also go to Afghanistan and show the world that it was possible to travel to Afghanistan without a guide. I also found a discussion group on WhatsApp and its corresponding Facebook group, and at that moment, those became my two main sources of information about Afghanistan. When I took the firm decision to visit Afghanistan, it was approximately mid-December 2025, and I was in Eastern Europe on my way to Turkey to try to obtain the Afghani visa in Istanbul. According to all the YouTube videos I had watched, the easiest way to get the Afghani visa was to travel to Pakistan, where the consulate in Peshawar had gained over the last couple of years the reputation of granting visas with minimal requirements. So at this consulate, you would get your visa without needing to pay for a letter of invitation from an Afghani travel agency, which could cost between $200 and $1,500 just for this letter alone. But then there was the following problem. I was in Turkey and I wanted to travel eastbound, finishing in Pakistan, and not the other way around. A few days later, I learned from that group that the Peshawar to Jalalabad border had been closed without any perspective or reopening. The next option, and with the low-cost flights from Istanbul to Mashhad, would be flying to the east of Iran and getting the visa there. But with the visa to Iran costing $80, I quickly gave up that plan. I also had to give up visiting Herat and the west of Afghanistan and enter the country via Kunduz or Mazar-e Sharif. So at that point, I was pretty sure I'd have no problem to get my visa in Istanbul. The only thing I was not sure about was where would I enter Afghanistan? And you actually need to say that on your visa application form. On the first working day of 2026, I went to the Taliban consulate in Istanbul. The first sign that I should have changed my mind came on that day. I went to the consulate in Istanbul more like in search of information than to actually get the visa. Many consulates have a notice board outside the building just so that you have information right there, 24 hours a day. Some others have the information printed out and ready to hand over, if asked. Not this one. Also, on that day, I've learned my first bit of Afghani culture. There is no such thing as, hey, I need this. Okay, here you are. Off you go. On arrival, I realized that there wasn't any information outside the door. No flag, and the only indication that that was the right place was by a coat of arms. Taliban like to be discreet, at least abroad, except for the shiny Maserati that they have parked in front of the house. I explained to the man at the door that I was from Brazil and was looking for information in detail on how to obtain a tourist visa for Afghanistan. Seeing that English was an alien language here, I used my phone to translate into Turkish. He checked something with a colleague and always politely gestured for me to follow him. I followed him to the upper floor of the large house, where two men showed me to a chair. One of them asked my name and my intentions. I gave him my name and showed him my Brazilian passport. After explaining that I was in search of information only and still hadn't decided which border I wanted to use, he went on, asking me general and more private questions. Immediately, I felt as if I was at some Norwegian or Swiss consulate, and the person in front of me was trying to determine whether I planned to emigrate to a highly developed and rich first world country. I had visited countries such as Iran, Jordan, Lebanon, and was used to privacy being unimportant in some cultures. So I found perfectly normal when the man started about marriage, children, or if I was a believer. The whole blah 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 lasted for about 20 minutes, followed by another 20 minutes sitting and waiting. I had no idea what for at a waiting room. Then finally, I was invited to a different room downstairs, where another man, who appeared to be the boss there, consul, who knows, briefly went through all the same questions from upstairs again, just to get to this point about whether I had a guide or any friend in Afghanistan. I said that no, and pointed out that they're too expensive for me. The whole speech about Afghanistan being or not a safe country, as seen from the Taliban side, goes a little bit like this. Now, we are the government. The tourists are very important for us, and you are always very welcome.
I have one message for America.
Welcome to Afghanistan.
However, we still have enemies within our territory, and it's our responsibility to protect tourists from these threats. And this is exactly what I heard from this council guy who concluded that, Alex, you need to find an official travel agency who will go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and they will write a letter to this consulate saying that you have been officially invited to Afghanistan and that they are responsible for you throughout your trip. The weirdest part of the whole conversation was almost when I was on my way out, they asked to take a photocopy of my passport and asked me for a phone number, to which I gave the number of one of the many disposable SIM cards that I had in my possession. Sometimes I think, if only I had said at that point, your man there literally said I am only setting foot in that country if I accepted to pay 50, 100, whatever dollars for a letter of invitation. So let me politely decline and also no, you're not having a copy of my passport, and moved on to visiting Pakistan, which is what I was planning to do right after. But no, I was really decided to go to Afghanistan, and saying no there would really have reduced my chances of a visa anywhere else. I left the consulate, and while sitting on that Istanbul bus going back, my brain was working full speed, wondering what I would do next. At the same time, this was also the approximate time when the riots in Iran had started, so I was lucky I decided not to go via the Iranian route. I spoke about my situation on the WhatsApp group, as many people were also looking for updates on obtaining visas in Istanbul. With the closure of the border with Pakistan, my options now would be number one, buying two flights, one down to Dubai, get the visa there, and then one to Kabul. And considering my very low budget, that wouldn't be an option. The other two options were crossing from Uzbekistan or Tajikistan. On the WhatsApp group, someone suggested that the Afghani embassy in Dushanbe was a rebel embassy. Their staff didn't accept the new situation in Afghanistan, and therefore the visas they were issuing were not valid in Afghanistan. So exceptionally, the border, Tajikistan to Afghanistan, was the only border where a visa on arrival arrangement was in place. Failing that, I could still travel to Uzbekistan, try to obtain the visa at the consulate in Termez, the Uzbek city near the border. So I found a one-way flight from Istanbul to Dushanbe for about $150 with Azerbaijan Airlines via Baku. On the day before the flight, I withdrew an amount worth $600 in Turkish lira using my debit card. There is plenty of exchange offices in Istanbul and they're very honest, contrarily to Europe, for example, where the few exchange offices are a bunch of crooks. So I exchanged my Turkish lira in 50s and $100 as new as possible because I knew in Asia some street changers are full of BS if the bills aren't smelling like they just came from the bank. I set off to Dushanbe with $600 in my hand baggage as well as €300 as an emergency backup. My idea was to spend between 10 and 15 days in Afghanistan, and I hadn't decided the next country after, so I didn't buy any flight out of Afghanistan. Before arriving at the new country, I always check the ATM Fee Saver app. I had decided to withdraw a minimum possible of Tajikistan's money or nothing at all, but if I found an ATM that provided free cash, I would get about $80 to spend and bring the Tajik money to the border with me to exchange. Luckily, at the airport in Dushanbe, after several tries, I found an ATM that would provide free cash withdrawal, and I took 800 Tajik somoni. By the way, the Tajik currency is one of the few in the world where you have a coin with a 3 denomination. Here it is, the 3 somoni coin for you. I was then at my country number 93. I planned to spend 36 hours in Dushanbe. Tajikistan had also some beautiful nature, lakes and mountains, but maybe some other day I will come back, since the idea now was literally just cross the border into Afghanistan. I spent one evening, went sightseeing in Dushanbe the next day, and then the morning after that, at 5 a.m., I was on a taxi on my way to Sahobat Park. outside Dushanbe, from where it was easy to find a share taxi to the Sherkham border. Initially, this driver asked me for 150 somoni, which was about 15 euro, and that was within the price range I was informed about. But on a very cold morning, the driver decided to persuade me and a Tajik man to pay 300, which I initially refused, but accepted 10 minutes later.
São 6 da manhã aqui em Dushanbe e eu estou num lugar chamado Mercado de Sakhovat. E isso seria daqui onde saem os carros para a fronteira. Então hoje é o grande dia. Esse maluco aqui é o motorista do carro e hoje eu vou tentar entrar no Afeganistão. E vamos lá. Dizem eles que daqui 2, 3 horas nós chegamos numa cidade chamada Pantipayon, que fica na fronteira, tem um rio, e aí você sai do Tajiquistão, atravessa essa ponte e tentar entrar, se nossos amigos do T permitirem.
Off we went to the border. There are also some regular buses from Dushanbe to a city called Dusti, but that is about 5 kilometers before the border, and probably a taxi from there to the actual border would cost you the same as the taxi from Dushanbe. A little before sunrise, a thick fog took over, and that would be pretty much the kind of weather I had for the next 2 days.
E aqui estamos à fronteira do Tajiquistão com o Afeganistão, galera. Vamos lá. Olha só a condição que tá isso aqui. E tudo aqui, ó. Aqui é a fronteira, então, e aqui você sai do Tajiquistão. Tudo com arame farpado. Agora vamos entrar na área de fronteira. Eu vou desligar a câmera e depois vamos ver como foi isso aqui.
After paying the driver with the Tajik money I had, I entered a fenced area.
Eu ia começar a andar, aí o guarda pediu para esperar. E aí chegou mais 3 pessoas e eu perguntei, o cara falou, estamos esperando o táxi. Aí eu perguntei, ué, por que eu não posso atravessar a pé? Aí ele falou, não pode. Aí agora estamos dentro do táxi.
Yes, the final couple of kilometers before the actual border were forbidden zone. Only people crossing the border were allowed, and strictly by car. There he goes, another couple of dollars to the taxi driver using my Tajik cash. Then we come to the actual border crossing, a roughly 200-meter fenced footpath that ends up in a small building. Not more than 5 people trying to cross, including me. Me, the Tajik guy who claimed he was going to Afghanistan for work, and another 3 Afghani men, crossing full of stuff, probably products from Tajikistan that they would sell in Afghanistan. I can't say they were smugglers because I didn't know if they had forbidden or totally legal product.
Então a primeira etapa ali, galera, não era a fronteira. Aí depois vem um táxi e te leva para a fronteira, que é onde eu tô agora. Tem uma construção, uma casa, e aqui os caras pegam teu passaporte. Aí, olha só, chegou essa galerinha aqui, ó. E nós estamos todos esperando para sair do Tajiquistão.
Passport stamped, I was asked to put my bags in the X-ray machine. What for an X-ray machine when you're leaving the country? And that's it. I was out of Tajikistan. I started to walk towards the bridge and cross it, even if I couldn't see 10 meters ahead. In front of me, it was all a big cloud, and it appeared I was walking to heaven, and not the most dangerous country in the world. When I looked down, also the river was not visible. I walked for what could have been 10 minutes. I don't know for sure. I was totally alone. No people, no cars. It was so eerie to be alone crossing a bridge to Afghanistan in the middle of the thick fog, seeing nothing but a few meters ahead.
Isso aqui então, galera, é o lado Tajik da fronteira. Eu acabei de sair do Tajiquistão. E isso aqui, ó, é a terra de ninguém. Isso aqui é o rio que divide o Afeganistão do Tajiquistão. Então o Afeganistão tá aí na frente, ó. Só que não dá pra ver nada por causa do nevoeiro. Esse nevoeiro aí que já leva mais de 3 horas, praticamente quase desde quando a gente saiu de Duxambé. Sinceramente não dá pra ver absolutamente nada. Na verdade dá pra ver um pouquinho ali, ó. A parte do rio que ainda dá pra enxergar. Então eu acho que deve ser bem alta aqui essa ponte. Mas eu não sei se ali do outro lado vai dar pra ver alguma sinalização de bem-vindo ao Afeganistão ou tirar algum tipo de foto. Vamos lá. Aquilo ali onde termina o cinza e começa o amarelo e preto, eu acho que é a fronteira exatamente. É, galera, cheguei, hein? Tá aí, ó. Essa aqui é a entrada.
But very slowly, a hint of what was on the other side started to appear. There was this arch with some stuff written on some language that writes from right to left. It still wasn't welcome to Afghanistan, but I stopped to take pictures. I took pictures with my phone, with my camera. Then I realized some indistinguishable human form was shouting something at my direction. I put the camera away and continued walking. Then I showed my passport to the first person. He pointed at another small building to the left. To the right, a gated dirt road and lots of trucks parked. And a few more meters down, there, yes, an arch with the words "Welcome to Afghanistan" in English. At the immigration window, I had my first contact with the Taliban in Afghani territory. He grabs my passport. Brazil. Browses the page from right to left and asks, "No visa?" I say no. Then I let all other people pass and waited. Then I get brought by a 1 meter 40 gentleman to a building nearby. Maybe I misunderstood this man, but he literally left me waiting 30 minutes outside in a cold.
Eu tô achando que eu talvez tenha entendido alguma coisa errada, porque o amiguinho do T me deixou esperando aqui nessa ruína, ó. Falou que tinha um outro turista aqui também esperando. Mas aqui tá tudo em escombro e já faz um bom bocado que ele me deixou esperando aqui, ó. Não sei quando que ele vai voltar. Isso aqui então, galera, é a sala de espera da fronteira do escritório aqui de Shirkan.
When I asked one of his colleagues if I could wait inside, then mysteriously I am brought to another staff in another room who start asking me questions, after which they send me to another room, warm this time. I crossed the border at 9. It was almost 10 o'clock. At around 10:30, someone asks me to go with another man to the town. I bring my handbag and they tell me I could leave my larger backpack with them. I accepted because I thought I didn't have any alternative and the large backpack only had clothes anyway. This man drives a really small Japanese right-hand drive car through Shere Khan that look more like the surface of the moon. He drives like a crazy lunatic and by miracle he manages to get to town without breaking the car in 1,000 pieces. He then takes me to the first money changer he finds. Street money changers in Afghanistan are all the same. Glass cards where they put all kinds of fake copies of money from everywhere for decoration. Euros, dollars, pounds, everything. But usually they only exchange dollars. And because we were near Tajikistan on this particular one, they also accepted my Tajik somoni that I had brought with me. I had a handwritten official document that one of the border officials gave me. It said there that I needed to pay 5,300 Afghani. Afghani is the very creative name of the local currency, always with very worn out bills, and of which the highest denomination was 1,000 Afghani. So the next thing after that, I'm brought to a walled property guarded by unarmed men, and the driver tells me this is the bank where I need to pay for my visa. We were both searched by security guards. The driver then helped me in every step. Firstly, he took me to a very small room with what appeared to be actual bank booths. There were about five of them. Only two were manned, and I understood we had to wait for a person who was about to arrive to start working, or who was on a break. Afghani people always leave their shoes outside, which is a positive thing, but that goes a bit too far when they consider that every closed space is an extension of their homes, including work environments. So one of the guys at this bank not only had one of his naked feet on top of the office desk, but he was also clipping his toenails with a nail clipper. Of course, nothing in Afghanistan is fast. So we waited about 20 minutes until this person appears. After we were done with all the paperwork, we had another scary drive back to the border. And of course, I was wondering, is that it? No, of course not. One of the border staff only then came to hand me over a form that I had to fill out. The form had my passport size picture that they had asked me before. Then I filled that out and I was told to sit and wait. I spent another long 3 hours wondering what else I was still waiting for. When two Russians came, one of them spoke English, and he explained to me that at that moment, all the people there were waiting for their visas, and it was normal that it took many hours. Finally, around 3 in the afternoon, I was called, and someone handed my passport back over to me with the visa and told me to go to the cabin outside to have it stamped. After that, I'd be free. One taxi after, I saw myself again in Sherkhan town, and I had to find a shared taxi to Kunduz, where I'd spend the night. It wasn't too easy, as there weren't so many people crossing the border that late in the afternoon. But eventually I found a shared taxi who obviously wanted to rip me off, but a friendly Afghani man who was also going to Kunduz helped me out. This man was really surprised that someone from Brazil was visiting Afghanistan, and he insisted about 10 times that I join him and spend the night with him as a guest in his home. Because I was so extremely tired from all the traveling and waiting, all I wanted was to lay my head on a pillow in a quiet hotel bed. So I convinced him to just point me to the closest hotel that wasn't too shabby, but also not too expensive. So he found me a rickshaw, and this man brought me to a place that at first appeared to be a restaurant. To my surprise, upstairs in the restaurant, there were some rooms with mattresses, probably reserved for families to have meals together.
Filmando aqui meio na encolha, galera, porque eu ainda não consegui a permissão de filmar. Mas, além de ser super interessante, é um dos lugares mais feios que eu já vi na minha vida. E basicamente é um mercado enorme com carne de animal, vendendo tudo no meio da rua.
The very friendly restaurant owner, in a broken English, invited me to come downstairs and have a traditional pulao meal, which is rice with dried grapes and a little bit of meat, which I accepted. I spent about 1 hour feeling like a tourist attraction myself, because the people who appeared to be the owner's family or just the restaurant staff or boat all came to sit next to me and try to have conversations, each one of them with different levels of English. At that point, the owner said he was obliged to keep my passport. The bathroom was very dirty and there was a cold shower, so I went to bed wearing the same clothes of the day. That is when my problems started. The first time the Taliban started to interfere with my trip with the same excuse of, you are a guest in our land, you are very welcome here, but we have the obligation to protect you, was on that same evening, 2 hours after I went to lay down. At around 11 p.m., the hotel staff was ordered by two men to be brought to me. These men enter my room, switch the light on, and feel at home, sit next to me, and wait for me to compose myself and pay attention to what they had to say. One of them, armed with a really weird and not too friendly look, didn't say a word. The other one started speaking English, showed me some badge that said Ministry of Interior, and then found someone else, so I understood the person on the phone would be translating for me. This translator started explaining all the "we are protecting you" BS story, and that I would need to accompany these men to a safe location. The price I was paying for that room was quite reasonable, so the first thing that came into my mind is, oh crap, they'll take me to a Taliban approved hotel 3 times more expensive. After a little reluctance, I saw that they wouldn't be taking no as an answer, so I started to pack again and entered the car with these two men, a little bit frightened to be honest. The accommodation they brought me to was to the south of the town and looked scary at first, but the next day I saw that there was nothing dodgy about the place. It's even listed on Google Maps under Kunduz Hotel and Guest House. And the Google reviews state that a night there costs 2,000 Afghani. When those men brought me, I was wondering how much I'd have to pay, but the friendly English-speaking receptionist, let's call him Ahmed, explained to me that usually our nightly rate is 1,500 with breakfast and Wi-Fi, but you're paying 1,000 room only. So at the end, the whole episode turned out to be very positive as I was brought to a much better hotel for the same price I was supposed to pay for the previous one. Of course, cold and still shaken up from the whole episode, I couldn't sleep at all. But little I knew that that would be just the first of many sleepless and cold nights in Afghanistan. On the morning of day 2 in Afghanistan, I went looking for Ahmed to try to confirm with him what would be the precise address where tourists should go to get this travel permit, a mandatory document that you need to be able to travel in Afghanistan. As I had obtained conflicting information on that WhatsApp group, I wanted to be sure. Also, I wanted to get my travel permits in Kunduz because I read on that group that they were being issued there for all provinces without the need of a letter of invitation. Unfortunately, day 2 in Afghanistan was absolutely useless since I had crossed the border on a Thursday and the next day was Friday, which is a day of rest in Muslim countries. All I could do was go outside, try to find a street money changer, and also get some food. Kunduz is not a tourist place. It has a main street with footpaths full of mud, thousands of shops selling everything, noisy. The traffic is a mess, and according to Google, the only place worth seeing is a fort from the 13th century called Balahisar. The weather was still very foggy, and you couldn't see much, so after a meal, I decided to take my video camera and walk there out of pure boredom. Balahisar is located to the north of Kunduz, an area full of rubbish in a country with severe waste management problems. It's located near a football pitch, and that's the closest I got to it, as I was afraid the area itself was forbidden for tourists. I made a few clips and walked back, crossing all the town center all the way to the hotel. The rest of day 2 was pretty much just watching movies on my laptop. Day 3 in Afghanistan, and I woke up early because walking to the government office would take me 30 minutes. There was no indication that the fog would dissipate. I went to the place that someone indicated on the WhatsApp group, knocked, bang, knocked, bang at the metal door, went to the street behind, maybe knocked at some wrong doors in the process. But yes, 9 o'clock, 9:30, nothing. There was then a second place that another person indicated on the WhatsApp group. I started to walk, then found a rickshaw and showed him my phone, so he decided to take me there. There was a main street and hundreds of side roads. I really wondered whether a government office would be located in that hidden place, but the driver appeared sure that it was the place and very keen on helping me out. That was the moment when I should actually have had second thoughts about the whole thing. I wouldn't be able to travel the country without this travel permit thing. No one in that group could give me solid information on how to get it. I tried to find locals in the group to help me get it, but was not successful. And here I was, in the middle of nowhere, looking for a government office that probably was the wrong place. I should have paid the driver and asked him to let me off right there and then, walk back to the hotel, catch the first share taxi to the border, and cross back to Tajikistan. Then we finally arrived at this government office. I even showed my phone with Google Translate open and the sentence, I am looking for the office where I can get travel permits for tourists. And the armed guys at the door said, yes, yes. But from that point on, everything would change. I was welcomed by a young gentleman who spoke passable English, who took me upstairs in a big and nice house. It was a little before 10 o'clock. Same story as always. People in a work environment feeling at home. Feet on the sofa, tea and peanuts, three men in a large room, a nice desk at the center that apparently was the desk of this head of department, a large Taliban flag on the side, and a coat of arms, and the words in English, Afghani National Disaster Management. That is where I was. The man who spoke to me immediately explained to me where I was, that I was their guest, and blah blah blah. And the head of the department was very curious about me, and so on. All the same personal questions about my work, if I was married, if I had kids, etc., etc., etc. And I saw the boss making some phone calls, and we kept chit-chatting, always with the promise that, don't worry, some man from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will come here and bring you to the correct place. When it was after 11 o'clock, I was starting to get a bit fed up with their hospitality and friendliness, and also started to wonder if I was really a guest. I repeated the question, can you please point me to the correct place so that I make my way there, as it's close to 12 o'clock and soon I'll have to check out from my hotel. It was only then that I understood I was being kept against my will. I was being abducted. Two men appeared finally, greeted everyone, and started chatting to my hosts. The youngest guy who was speaking English to me, after about 20 minutes of chit chat, finally approached me and said I was to follow them. They would be taking my passport and my phone. Here, a reminder, there were several armed men, and I don't know how they would be reacting to me refusing to follow their orders. These men took me back to my hotel in their car. On arrival, they went looking for the hotel manager, who I hadn't met before, and who spoke English almost as well as Ahmed. And the manager explained to me that these men are from the government. They will want to search your belongings, as they found very suspicious that you just turned up at some disaster management office, and they think you might be a spy. If you have nothing suspicious, you're free to go. What followed was a very nervous 30 minutes of seeing two armed strangers turning all my belongings upside down. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I haven't lived anywhere permanently for the last couple of years, so maybe I have a little bit more stuff with me than the usual tourist on a 2-week holiday. They left the building with my tablet, some flash drives, my two mobile phones, and my two passports. At that point, I was already horrified and couldn't believe what was happening to me. I was then told I wasn't allowed to leave the hotel until they came back. All I did was walk across the road and have a meal at a restaurant, and then I came back to my hotel. Yes, they were so kind to leave me with some money. 1 hour later, they came back. They weren't so nice that time. Basically, they took all my belongings, everything. They left me with my clothes on, that's all. I asked if I was being arrested. They said no, but they said I had to wait in the hotel and I wasn't even allowed in the court area. It was then over 2 o'clock and I would probably be required to pay for a third night at the hotel. It took me a few seconds to start to believe what was happening in front of me, but when I finally did, I ran to this man who were already at the door of my room and I asked to count my cash. I took my backpack, found my cash, and started counting the euro, which amounted to 315 euro. I wrote down on the envelope the number 315. Then I started counting the dollars, with the pressure of them saying whatever in the language, me trying to finish with that fast. It was at that point that one took my dollars from my hand, and I took them back. And then at that point, I noticed that the three brand new $100 bills I had just counted were gone. One of those guys pulled off a magician's trick and made $300 vanish right there and then, next to me. At the end of the afternoon, they came a final tally. Poor Ahmed, always so kind, was with them, and he who had to translate everything to me. One of the men had a sheet of A4 paper to take notes. Remember when I said that Afghani people love to feel at home anywhere? Yeah, they take off their sandals, enter my bedroom, sit with their legs up on the bed next to my bed. They then tell me to sit on my bed. Ahmed sat at a chair and they start asking away, with Ahmed translating. They were two men, one who barely spoke at all, and a younger one who maybe knew 5 words of English. Who are you? Name and surname, age, passport. Yeah, and you have another nationality, right? How did you get it? So you have two passports. All a bunch of stupid questions being asked with a single purpose to see if I would give any false answers, since they knew everything because they had my life belongings in their possessions. But the questions that kept repeating were always the same. What were you doing at that government office? What are your intentions in Afghanistan? When they were done with all the interrogation, it was almost 6 o'clock. It was already dark. When I asked Ahmed if this was going to end that day, he translated the guy's answer. No, you were not allowed to leave the hotel. And now it's too late already. Our office is closing, so you're definitely spending the night here. I was alone, stuck in a hotel room in Kunduz, Afghanistan. No phone, nothing, no cash. All I had was my clothes, 2 bottles of water, 2 oranges that I bought the day before from a street seller, no wristwatch. Their room had a TV, but I had no clue how to make it work. I also had an electric heater and blankets, as it was really cold. The fog outside persisted for the third day in a row. I started to wonder if Mother Nature was trying to replicate my mood or my situation with that weather. My brain was working at full speed, a state of disbelief, attempts to understand what was going on. Also, how can people be so cold? And at the same time, they say, "You're a guest, you're welcome here." They were treating me that way. Day two of my house arrest at that hotel was extremely boring. In the previous evening, they brought me food. Then on the second day, they brought me breakfast, which the hotel would normally provide at a higher price, water. Then they brought me lunch. And at the end of the day, dinner again. I spoke to Ahmed. He had the men's WhatsApp number. He tried to contact them, but he claimed no answer came back. At some point during the day, I looked at the bedside table and found the TV's remote. So I started zapping domestic and Iranian channels and one local documentary channel that was half in English and half in Farsi. They rerun 3 times this documentary about a new Iranian Afghani cargo railway being built, connecting Mashhad in the east of Iran to Herat and the rest of Afghanistan. In my mind, the possible outcomes of this whole situation were starting to be drawn. Like 60% I thought they would release me, maybe apologize for the whole misunderstanding, give me travel permits, and beg that I forgot the whole episode and never spoke about it in public. Yes, haha, total wishful thinking. Then there was a 30% possibility that they would plant something on my belongings or read something on the various social media apps that I still use nowadays and decide that I am an enemy of the state and lock me in jail for life. Or even worse, a 10% possibility that they would decide that Alex should mysteriously disappear. Remember that Western countries nowadays issue travel advice for their citizens. And if you're a bad, bad guy and decide to travel to certain countries against their advice, they will wash their hands in case you're in trouble. One more cold and sleepless night, and day three of my ordeal started with breakfast. A whole morning had passed with no new developments. The next time I saw those men, there would be two alternatives. Did they have my belongings? Then I was free. Did they not? Then my suffering would continue, and no one knew where they would take me and what they would do to me. Then, roughly before lunchtime, the guys appear. No sight of my belongings. I hear the word Kabul being repeated, and at the same time, I get really worried about where my belongings would be. Then one of them tells me to pick up anything I had in the bedroom. I was coming with them. Instantly, a whole new world of horrible possibilities started to populate my tired mind. Why the hell would I need to go to Kabul? Imprisonment, torture, or the end? The only good news of the day. My belongings were there. One of the guys brings my wallet and tells me to pay the hotel and for the food I had been offered. I would notice this trend more and more. I was being taken to a place against my will, deprived of my freedom, and on top of it all, I had to pay for everything from my own pocket. And all the time, I was still being called a guest. This car brings me, my two backpacks, and other three men to this shared taxi location outside Kunduz. Two of the three men were the same who had interrogated me 2 days before. The youngest one now was showing some signs of friendliness, translating things on his phone and trying to communicate with me somehow. Let's call him Mohammed, and the other one Mr. Grumpy. When we were dropped at the shared taxi location, the two men stayed with me. The third one left by car. Mohammed was traveling with a gun. Let's consider it was an AK-47. I have no clue about guns, and this is what I suppose every Taliban in Afghanistan would use. We waited quite some time. We sat in a taxi first. Then, for whatever reason, a good 30 minutes later, it just wouldn't leave. Then we got off and found another one. I had no idea why. Mohammed was surprisingly starting to become more friendly. And during my short stay in Afghanistan, I noticed how all those people are so eager to leave their country. He started to ask me questions about whether it was possible to emigrate to Brazil as an Afghani citizen, subject about which I have next to zero knowledge. At the same time, at that point, I considered very selfish of him. Like, come on, you're participating in an abduction of a foreign citizen to what could be maybe a horrible end or a long stay in an Afghan jail. You come talking to me about your future when maybe I myself didn't have any future whatsoever? I kept saying that to live in Brazil, there would be no government benefits. He would need to learn Portuguese and work like crazy. When he was done with his silly, selfish questions, I asked him what was the duration of the trip. He said 9 hours. The trip to Kabul.